But first, I'm delighted to welcome the former Deputy Campaign Manager for Congressman Ron Paul, and of course the President and CEO of Liberty Guard at libertyguard.org, Joe Seehusen. And Joe's currently attending the annual CPAC conference down there, where all the prospective presidential candidates are giving their speeches. Welcome to the show today, Joe. Great to have you on the air.
Paul, thank you. It's great to be with you.
Now, of course, as I just said, you're at CPAC representing Congressman Ron Paul. And yesterday we had this spectacle of Donald Trump, another one of the prospective presidential candidates. He says he's considering whether to run, dismissing the chances of the 11-term congressman, Ron Paul, of beating Obama in 2012. Saying he had, quote, zero chance of doing so. And in fact, we're just going to go to a brief clip of Donald Trump now saying that. Go to the clip.
I wish there was a candidate that I saw that would be fantastic, because I love what I'm doing. In fact, I have a great club that's 15 minutes away. By the way, Ron Paul cannot get elected, I'm sorry to tell you. Sorry. And you know what else? I like Ron Paul. I think he's a good guy. But honestly, he has just zero chance of getting elected. You have to win an election.
So that's Donald Trump there. And Joe, you've since been quoted in the National Journal as labeling Trump's comments as, quote, preposterous. Explain to us why he's wrong and how, in fact, Ron Paul can beat Obama next year.
You're right. I'm at CPAC and representing, of course, really Liberty Guard and Congressman Barr's organization, and I was the Deputy National Campaign Manager for Ron Paul and the ever delightful Donald Trump. Of course, he loves to tell us he's ready to run the government. He's clearly adept at running, in effect, his mouth. I respectfully say that. He needs to distinguish between a cheer and a jeer. This morning he was on Morning Joe saying that when he made that comment, he was being cheered wildly. And I think if you look at it and listen to it, he was being jeered as much as he was being cheered. He made the comment that Congressman Paul kind of didn't have any electability, and of course the interesting thing is that Congressman Paul has been actually elected to office 11 times, and Mr. Trump, I believe, has not been elected to any office. And so I think I did say it was a preposterous statement for him to say that, kind of dismissing Dr. Paul out of hand, who has a very large national organization really in place should he choose to use it. He has national name recognition. And more importantly, he really has a serious, sound economic policy, foreign policy, monetary policy, a program to defend civil liberties that's well articulated and very popular, not only among Republicans and Libertarians, Independents, but many Democrats as well. He has a very broad reach. And so while Mr. Trump is now a kind of a television star and a real estate mogul and a wonderful American who has a lot of vitality for the free market, and I have a lot of respect for him, I did make the comment that this is politics, and he is in many ways really a neophyte at that. Just in terms of he has not run for office to my knowledge and hasn't won. So I think Dr. Paul, were he to run, I think would mount a serious challenge to Barack Obama, given that his policies are really the antithesis of Mr. Obama's policies of more government, more intervention, Dr. Paul being more freedom, less intervention, both nationally and internationally.
And of course, we had this Rasmussen poll this week, which shows that Ron Paul has a better chance of beating Obama than indeed Sarah Palin, who, of course, is not there at CPAC, but she's going to be one of the big establishment Republican candidates who they're going to heavily push in the coming months. And this poll showed that Ron Paul was 2 points ahead of her in terms of the ability to defeat Obama. Now, what's interesting is we had this recent 15-point bounce that Obama enjoyed after the Tucson shootings. Before that, and of course that bounce is certain to subside, before that we had a poll, another Rasmussen poll in April of last year that said that if Ron Paul and Obama went head-to-head, that it would basically be a dead heat. I mean, Obama only edged that poll by 1%, and that's before, of course, the mobilization of the grassroots Ron Paul movement that you just mentioned. So, I mean, both of those polls completely contradict Trump's claim that he'd got, quote, zero chance, surely, don't they, Joe?
Well, it really does, and it's a couple of serious polls showing really this statistical dead heat. And again, I think that's because Dr. Paul has a legitimate foreign policy, domestic policy, and that it is appealing not only to Republicans but also many Democrats, independents, libertarians, and it's well articulated and it's thoughtful. And it actually, I think Americans this next cycle are really going to be looking for solutions. And Sarah Palin is certainly a charismatic figure, clearly a polarizing figure. Mr. Obama has been a polarizing figure. I think Dr. Paul, with his emphasis on the Constitution, that being that document that really welcomes everyone and addresses their concerns, a broad spectrum of people can look at and live within the Constitution and be able to pursue their life, liberty, and happiness. I think there's a broad-based appeal, and his candidacy, if he were to run, would be serious and a serious challenge. So, again, Mr. Trump is a charismatic and a delightful American, and charming and very successful in many ways. And but I think to dismiss a serious candidate out of hand, I thought was somewhat whimsical on his part.
And you mentioned the fact that we've got this whole raft of polarizing candidates, certainly many of which are there at CPAC at the moment. Isn't it the case that, you know, if Republicans just elect a George Bush 2.0, someone like Mitt Romney or Newt Gingrich, you know, another neocon, that will completely eliminate the chances of securing these swing votes? We know that there are millions of dissatisfied independents and Democrats who have completely lost faith in, you know, Obama's hope and change, and that those votes are on the table. And in fact, won't Ron Paul be in the perfect position to capture that demographic, whereas the more establishment candidates won't?
Well, and this is something that America's really kind of waking up to with the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, this kind of swing from polar opposite to polar opposite. You know, you have one party winning, and of course they want to benefit their special interest group. The other party wins, they want to benefit their special interest group supporters. But really, you know, the two parties really have one thing in common. They really want to interfere and intervene in your life, certainly domestically and internationally. You know, they want to be involved in your money. They want to be involved in your freedom, your civil liberties. And now we even have the moxie to say that we want to be involved in making decisions for our other sovereign nations around the world. And someone like a Dr. Paul, someone with that more libertarian, more free market, more constitutional, traditional American-based worldview is really more of what you'd call a non-interventionist, a person that says we look at our citizens, we treat them with respect as adults, they make their choices, they take the responsibility for their choices, and good heavens, overseas, these are sovereign people and sovereign nations. Really, it's kind of none of our business to get involved with them dictating what they should do. And I think, and hopefully, that's what we'll do, is we'll, if you will, kind of transcend this seesawing back and forth between interventionists on the right versus interventionists on the left, and going back and forth, and saying if we're really going to solve problems such as our debt, such as these foreign wars and our civil liberties, then we're really going to have to look to people that are principled in traditional American values of free markets, a true free market, and true constitutional, reestablishing our constitutional republic and making sure that's vibrant and vital. And so that's why a Dr. Paul type candidate would be so helpful to this country, whereas many of these other candidates, Democrat or Republican would be kind of a continuation of this whipsawing kind of polarity. And to this point of civil liberties, and this is really where our group, Liberty Guard, really comes in, and the work we've been doing with the TSA, and then I've had the pleasure of talking to Alex and his audience about this vital issue of the TSA and how they have, as part and parcel of this culture of intervention, feel that they can, of course, not only take electronic images of us trying to get into airports that end up essentially denuding us and taking nude photographs of us, but then this much more draconian measure of these full body searches, and that's something that Liberty Guard has been very active in combating, and that's something we were wanting to visit with you today on.
Yeah, because of course Liberty Guard was one of the groups at the forefront of the backlash against the TSA, which really kicked into high gear at the back end of last year. Now, you had this Freedom of Information Act request, and of course that was dealing with a demand for the TSA to turn over all information on this blatantly obvious stand-down that occurred over the Thanksgiving period, when reports were pouring in from across the country of naked body scanners being turned off and these invasive pat-downs being temporarily mothballed in what we wrote at the time basically was a political stunt to derail the momentum of this National Opt-out Day protest, which was occurring at exactly the same time. Now, Joe, first the TSA tried to ignore you. They tried to buy some time with this Freedom of Information Act request. Now I understand you've got to the stage where you're preparing the lawsuit. Can you give us an update on that situation and where it's heading at the moment?
Well, thank you. And yes, that's exactly right. When I last spoke with Alex, we were talking, and we had, of course, filed the Freedom of Information Act, and we were fully expecting that we would not get a response. And I think I was even on the air the day that the TSA needed to respond. And much to our amazement, quite literally at the last moments before it was due, we were notified that they were responding. And essentially, that was really a tactical maneuver on their part to prohibit us from actually being able to file the federal lawsuit that we were prepared to file. It forced us to go into an administrative remedy in which we and the TSA begin a process of discussions to try to understand and get to the bottom of this. But the problem is, of course, that could take a month or 2 or 6. They could certainly drag it out. One could understand why they would want to drag it out, because in their response to us, they said, and really our response, Paul, we wanted to know specifics, and we wanted to say, did you discuss Alex Jones? Did you discuss Prison Planet? Did you discuss Bob Barr and Liberty Guard? Did you discuss Matt Drudge? And if you did, we want to know about it. And did you have discussions that might indicate that you were going to stand down on the day or two, the Thanksgiving day or two before? These are the most heavily traveled days. And the days in where the TSA, what they have told us is that those would be the days you'd want to have lots of extra scans. You'd want to really have those machines at top form, because they have told us that our well-being, our safety in the skies is contingent upon those machines and contingent upon those searches.